Welcome to the ISO Show, dispelling myths and sharing tips for success to improve your business with ISO standards, with your host, Mel Blackmore.
Hello and welcome to the ISO Show. Well, today I'm joined by David Ball, who's the CEO and founder of Brandfuel, a leading event management company. And David's here to tell us all about Brandfuel and their sustainability journey, even through a pandemic, believe it or not. You'd think that the events management industry were on the knees, which many other businesses, types of organisations have been during the pandemic, but it's a really inspirational story in terms of how Brandfuel have been diversifying and also their commitment to sustainability management. It is really interesting to hear their journey and how they've gone about implementing ISO 20121, the Sustainable Event Management Standard. So very warm welcome to you, David. Thanks for joining us today.
Hi Mel, good morning to you. Very, very nice to be here.
Cool. So before we dive in, could you tell us something that not many people know about you, please, David?
Yeah, of course. I'm very proudly half Jamaican. As such, I managed to persuade the Jamaican International Triathlon Union to let me race for Jamaica in the World Championships. So I did the long course triathlon as the Jamaican team, the only Jamaican team member, flag bearer and everything else a couple of years ago in Denmark.
Wow, that's really impressive, David. You kept that one quiet. That reminds me of the Cool Runnings movie where
It was just like that. I was the flag bearer, the only member of the team, and everybody thought it was hilarious.
So I've got to ask, sorry, how was that like a mission of yours to do that, or how did you manage to do that?
Well, a long time ago, I managed to get in the Great British team as an age group athlete, and I raced in the World Champs in Nice. And I just thought, as I massively love Jamaica and my Jamaican heritage, I thought it would be phenomenal to try and do the double and actually race again in the same World Champs, but for Jamaica instead. And they welcomed me with open arms, so that was great.
Brilliant, well done. Excellent, that's a fantastic accolade, isn't it?
It's a bit of fun.
Cool. I wasn't expecting that one. Great. So Brandfuel then, could you give us a bit of background please on what Brandfuel does and also the types of events that you provide for your clients?
Yeah, so we're a creative events agency and we really specialise in creating experiences for brands. And they can be anything from, these days, virtual events, lots of them, and very different types of virtual events, broadcast programmes. Our core sort of work used to be in exhibitions, so about half of our turnover would be in the exhibition world. But we also do a lot of conferences, demos, dinners, award ceremonies. And I think the key thing about us as an organisation is we work really hard with clients over the long term to translate their business needs and objectives into really measurable results for their business. And that journey has been a fabulous one for the last 16 years. And we started with some incredible clients. So I've been working with Google before I started the company. So probably working with Google for the last 18 years. And we've been one of their core agencies on that journey with them, which has been extraordinary. And that's led to other tech companies. So we have a really phenomenally strong client list of people ranging from companies like Slack and Stripe and Snapchat and obviously Google and YouTube, but also in the financial services sector with companies like BlackRock and Barclays and Deloitte and all sorts of people.
Yeah, impressive. So talking about fun, have you got a favourite event that you've run in the past? I know obviously you'll have a lot of favourite events and clients, but are there any in particular that stand out in your mind?
Well, we are really fortunate in that we're involved in two of the world's, what I would call tentpole moments. One is the World Economic Forum in Davos, and we've been helping clients to present their brands there for the last 14 years. And the other one is Mobile World Congress. And we were fortunate enough to be the first people to build an exhibition stand for Android at Mobile World Congress. And we've been building their exhibition stand and their presence for Google across all their brands at that ever since. And it's an amazing job. But I think for the sheer joy of it and the extraordinary environment, Davos and the WEF, we call it the Magic Mountain. It is an extraordinary place to be and to spend a week wandering around in minus 26, 2 meters of snow, and helping clients to engage with some of the most interesting, smartest people and CEOs and government ministers and heads of state that you'd ever see. An extraordinary collection of people.
What an experience. And I think obviously with some of those clients, sustainability will be so important to them. One of the next questions I was going to ask was just around sustainability in the events management industry. I mean, it has had a bit of a track record of producing a lot of waste. And I know that there's been a lot of incentives across the industry to be more sustainable. So could you just kind of share with me your thoughts on sustainability in the events industry, please, David?
Yeah, I mean, where do we start? I think it's very easy in the events industry to ignore the elephant in the room. And there is absolutely no doubt that in a numbers sense, that transport and travel accounts for the majority of the carbon emissions in the events industry. And that's really bad news for the events industry because events are all about people going places to meet up. So if you take that away, then it's an impossible scenario for the events industry going forwards. But it is one that has to be measured and has to be mitigated, and I think there'll be some substantial changes following this year of very little travel. And look at me as an example. I would normally probably take in excess of 100 flights a year. It was almost a daily commute to go to Zurich or Paris or Barcelona or whatever it might be. And last year I flew twice. I flew to Zurich and I flew back from Zurich for the WEF, and that was it. So I think that's the big elephant in the room. And we know with most of our jobs, most of our events, 75% of the carbon emissions is related to travel, transport in some way, whether that's trucking, flying is obviously the big one, or other transport. I think the second thing is that there are simple things that can be done, but you need your clients on board with you to do them. I'm happy to say that we're past what was, I think, an attitude within clients where they wanted to be seen to be doing the right thing. But actually, if it cost more money, they wouldn't do it. And I think we're now in a new realm, happily, where clients not only want to be seen to be doing the right thing, but they also actively want to be able to demonstrate their commitment to sustainability now and in the future. And they're willing to pay for it. So I think we're heading into a very exciting new dawn where sustainability is very high up the client's requirement list of what they want from you as an agency to deliver for them. And one of the big examples for me has been Google. I remember probably 13 or 14 years ago presenting a little press conference in Davos with Larry Page, Sergey Brin, and I think it was Thomas Friedman who was moderating it. And Larry was very keen to tell the assembled press that he wanted to make Google the most sustainable business in the world. And he'd set a deadline, and that was 10 years. And he was talking about their solar panels on the roof of Mountain View, which was one of the biggest installations for a corporate at the time. And sure enough, a little piece of press, and they didn't make a big song and dance about it, but about 3 years ago, so in that 10-year time frame, they published that they were not only net neutral as a global organization, even with those massive data centers, but they were actually contributing. So it was an interesting moment. And we then have been working with them. We do the Google Sustainability Stand, which goes out, gets reused all the time for various different shows like EGU. And we work really closely now in the last couple of years with the sustainability people across the pond in Google, have a great relationship with them, and they're really helpful in helping to educate and train us, as well as we give back to them our measurement and our processes when we translate their designs into physical exhibition spaces. And at Davos, 2 years ago, when we produced the last pavilion for Google in Davos, we did it with huge levels of sustainable delivery in mind. We set ourselves some very stiff targets. And I think the key result that we measured was that less than 2% of everything we did there ended up in landfill. We were on a 98% number, measured independently by Meet Green in the US. And it was a phenomenal success. Everything from the power was from a hydroelectric source, so that was renewable. All of our materials, the majority of them, were either recycled, reused, or from recycled sources, upcycled for the event, even down to bar counters being made out of yogurt tops. And little bits of communication so that every visitor to that space could see the story behind the materials, the material use, the material source, or the onward source of that material.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think you explaining about that, it's very much a partnership, isn't it, on sustainability? And I think everybody plays a part. And I think it's interesting hearing about Google's journey from being a major contributor from a negative perspective through to carbon neutrality and all of the initiatives. And I know that they've also been heavily involved in ISO 50001, the energy management standard for their data centres, and how they've really turned that around significantly over the years to not just be carbon neutral, but to be carbon positive as well, which obviously working in partnership with other organisations. I think at the end of the day, it's working in collaboration together, isn't it, to achieve those sustainable results. And interesting to hear about some of those kind of initiatives that you use as part of that sustainability journey as well. And I think it's kind of talking points like that that make people kind of sit up and take notice and think, well, maybe we should be thinking differently about how we operate, not necessarily just in the events industry, but within our own companies, back in our own homes as well, because everything that we do is basically, it counts, doesn't it?
Yeah, it really does. Even down to food and food waste. A simple decision, possibly one of the biggest simple decisions that you can make, is never to serve beef at an event, because it's singly the most contributing food as part of the protein chain to carbon emissions. Weirdly, I'm doing a project at the moment which is a film for FAIR, which is the Farm Animal Investment Risk and Research Organisation. And that is about using investment as the major tool to turn our protein systems round from really horribly carbon intensive to much more carbon neutral.
Yeah, I mean, it was a bit of a turning point for me just a couple of years ago, and I watched Cowspiracy, the documentary on Netflix, to realise not just about CO2 emissions, but all the other GHG emissions as well, like methane, and the massive difference it can make to the environment by going plant-based. And obviously at your events you will be serving food, so it is just one of those considerations now, isn't it? And providing options to your clients as well. So you've potentially got options A, which is sustainability is at the top of the agenda, down to B, C, but looking at the potential impact of that.
They say that cows are the new conversation.
Yes.
It's no longer data's the new oil.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I've been plant-based for some time now, and I'm actually really enjoying it. I'm feeling the benefits of it. It is a bit of a culture shift, I think, for a lot of individuals and families. And also, obviously, in the food industry, it's a major, major change, but definitely one to help the planet without a shadow of a doubt. So before we just dive into 2012 the Sustainable Event Management Standard, one thing I'd love to find out from you, David, is how you've adapted during the pandemic. So we're recording this in 2021, but obviously 2020 was a roller coaster for all of us. But I know that in the events industry, it was a major upheaval in that industry. Yet you still managed to achieve certification to ISO 2012-1. Now, I know that obviously we started the journey sometime before the lockdown, so I know a lot of the work had already been completed and we were all ready to go through the assessments for 2012-1 when actually all the events were cancelled, so we couldn't actually do an assessment at a physical event. And at the time we were scratching our heads thinking, well, how are we going to get around this one then? So David, somehow you made it happen. Could you just share with us how you managed to do that, please?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a catastrophic year, but it's been an exciting year. I love a challenge, and wow, we've had plenty of those to deal with. So as you said, in March, probably by the end of April, we had lost, and by that I mean most of it was cancelled. Some of it was moved many times actually, in terms of when events were going to happen, to the point where I think we lost £36 million of business. We lost everything. I mean, our entire forward order book was empty. The adaptation was really quick. We decided instantaneously that we had to do everything online. We had to learn about putting on virtual events. We had to really become a broadcast business and learn every facet of broadcast as quickly as possible. And so we were fortunate in being agile. We were really quick to practice and train. And I set up some vehicles to help us do that, one of which was an internal brand called Fuel Studios. And Fuel Studios was the overarching umbrella that allowed us to play, train, learn, and get as much experience of broadcast as possible within the bounds of the agency to then be able to use it with clients. So we did things like, very first thing I did was turn all the company meetings into broadcast events, into shows. And we started segmentizing the shows, so we'd have segments like Crew Cribs, where we would mimic in a sort of 4 or 5 minute video someone sharing their home with us, and practice the filming, the editing, and other interesting things like using triggered audio watermarking on mobile devices to add content into video that you're broadcasting. So really clever, some clever stuff too. We did lockdown lowdown, so that was getting everyone at home to video what they were up to in lockdown and assembling that into fun segments. And we did many other things. So the studio learned to design 3-dimensional virtual sets, learning about green screen, lighting, camera work, multi-camera work, camera tracking, XR stages. I mean, we literally did everything. And it really proved so useful because within a few months, we were given an incredible opportunity with an existing client, a major asset management business, to do their global annual summit. It was 3,500 virtual attendees, US, Europe, Asia, US and Europe running in the afternoon, Asia running from 2 in the morning. And we had clients in New York and on the West Coast. We had speakers all around Europe, and we had crew in West London, weirdly, Menorca, Milan, and you'd have a 40-second delay and all sorts of stuff to manage. But you know what? We did it. It was super complicated, massive scale, very quick, gave us lots of confidence, and we never looked back.
Wow. Talk about diversification and innovation. That's just amazing. I knew that you were quick to adapt because I'd heard through, one of my colleagues that has been working with you on the 2012 one and stuff, that you were taking events online, but I didn't realise, how you did that. And that is just really inspirational to kind of look, okay, well, you could just bury your head in the sand and hope and pray that COVID-19 would blow over and you'll have a business at the end of it. Or why not take it as a huge opportunity to do something different? And it's interesting, I think one of the common themes, David, is about making it fun as well. So you mentioned about lockdown, lowdown, I think it was that you mentioned. I bet that was quite interesting. But also I think just from a CSR perspective, because a lot of businesses think of CSR just purely from an environmental point of view, but it is also about acting responsibly and doing the right thing for your employees and other stakeholders. And that also includes, during the pandemic, of course, mental health. So I think helping to bring hope, to employees and new ways of working and new challenges to really help to kind of innovate the organisation and to continue to take it to the next level. but also at the same time being able to continue to deliver world-class events for your clients when others are really struggling. But I think what we've all found is that by being isolated, there is a huge opportunity to be connected as well. And clearly, by bringing together an event for over 3,000 people in such a short space of time, I think that's obviously going to potentially change the way that it's another, I guess, feather in your cap as far as Brandfuel services are concerned. But is that something that you can see still working, long after COVID has hopefully kind of gone away?
I mean, Mel, it's a great question. I think the theme for me throughout this period has been uncertainty and managing uncertainty and having the right systems to manage uncertainty. And I think we're having conversations with clients now who were talking about being desperate to get back to face-to-face events and are now talking about the role that virtual events might play longer term in their future for certain types of things. Now, that doesn't rule out, obviously, they want face-to-face. Everybody does. But it does mean that they have seen some of the benefits of running virtual events for certain types of business challenges. And there are benefits. We've had unprecedented access to new audiences because they haven't had to travel anywhere, to new ways of giving the audience opportunities to digest information so they don't have to be live. They can digest it at any time they want, and which is weirdly quite new for events, and also unprecedented access to talent. Instead of talent having to be booked at great expense for a day or 2 days to come to your venue for a half hour or hour performance or speaking moment, now you can book that talent for an hour wherever they are in the world at less money because it's more economical for them, and that is a massive benefit.
And of course it's more sustainable as well because you haven't got all these speakers flying in from different locations, and I know obviously you can't beat that face-to-face contact, but I think in some cases you wouldn't have been able to get those speakers, would you, necessarily, in some cases. And also I think one of the other massive value adds for clients that are running events like this is that those speakers can be recorded and they can be listened to time and time and time again. So it's not just the audience in the room, but it's all the other stakeholders that could benefit from whatever that message is at that event.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Good. So 2012 one then. So the Sustainable Event Management Standards. So I know that, we had the Sustainable Event Management System in place and we were all ready to go. And then obviously COVID hit. And so could you just explain a bit about how you diversified in terms of the actual events that you were running to then switch it to online events for the assessment, and how did that go?
Well, it was quite tricky because first and foremost we needed to find a suitable set of events to be measured, and they needed a balance of some in person, and clearly the actual event delivery was always virtual, and that needed permissions from clients and it needed a lot more planning on our side. So the first one we were really fortunate with was we do an annual event for BGC Partners, who are the world's largest electronic data brokerage. And it's their charity day. It's always on September the 11th. It's in recognition and honour of all the staff that they lost in the Twin Towers. It's a very emotional day for them, and it's a very important one for them. And regularly they would raise between 10 and $12 million in a day. And they do that by having almost 100 celebrities come onto the trading floor in London and to trade with their clients over the phone. And the commissions and everything else, profits from the trades, all go to charity globally on that one day. And the city really gets behind it. The city hold back great deals for that one day to try and make the trades as big as possible. Now, to do that virtually was a challenge in itself, but the client was willing to give it a go with us and also to be assessed by your team so that it could be part of our assessment progress for the ISO. We had a big team that had to go on site. Fortunately, BGC had moved from the Barclays building to a building next door, and we had a completely empty floor. So we were able to massively social distance right across this floor with all of our technical kit, which this is an unusual event because we are now bringing celebrities in virtually to have, for the first time, video conversations with BGC's clients who were also virtual. And we were the broker in the middle of that. And that gave us access to talent that we'd never get physically. So, we had Kelly Osbourne from her apartment in LA, Nile Rodgers from his apartment in Manhattan. We had cricketers and golfers from Florida. So it was very different, but it worked really well. It formed an important part of our assessment. It's recently won an award for the Best Digital Event Award for charity. And we also raised a phenomenal $10 million with only 25 celebs instead of 100, but everything virtual. So that was the first one. And then we were very fortunate to be able to work with Barclays, and they have a big event that's normally an in-person event called New Frontiers, and we'd won the pitch to do that virtually for them last year. And that was the final kind of ratification event that, again, we had very large technical crews running that, and we were able to use that with their blessing to finalise that last piece of the jigsaw.
Well, well done for turning that around and being able to deliver those. It sounds as though they're really complicated on many different levels, but well done, and congratulations for that award as well. So now that you're certified to ISO 20121, what would you say have been some of the benefits, David?
Oh, the benefits are huge. The obvious one from my point of view is that we are now commercially ratified as being an agency that you can trust to work to the highest standards in sustainability. It's very important for us that our clients know that, and this is really helpful for us to be able to simply say to them, well, we have this certification, and we're involved in lots of other ways too around sustainability. It is a big focus for us. We think that it is going to be one of the biggest buying signals and cues that clients will show in the future, and we want to be the weapon of choice for them. We want buyers in the future to select agencies who are the most sustainable deliverers. So I think the other key thing for us, Mel, is management systems. Our internal management systems are now so much better. That gives us an incredibly strong platform on which to build on and to keep building. And I think that for any agency is really important. I think the watch outs for me were, it's very easy to talk to other people who are dismissive of ISO standards and their value, and also see them as being really too onerous and too difficult to onboard and to do successfully. And I have to say, I think it comes down to focus and to carefully allocating the right amount of resource internally. And it is a time commitment and it is a resource commitment. But when you do that and you really stand behind it as a business, for us, it ran incredibly smoothly, obviously with huge help from Paul and your team. But it was a good process, one that we actually enjoyed.
Good. And I think one thing that we've been really impressed with is how Brandfuel have integrated. You mentioned about the management system, and for some companies they might have a separate manual that is almost like divorced from the rest of the organisation, but you've really brought that into the DNA of Brandfuel because it's part of the fueling station, which in effect is your go-to place, isn't it, within the business, your intranet, that place that everybody can go to as a hub for everything social, your policies, your handbook, and everything about how you operate your system ultimately for running successful, sustainable events is all in there. And ISO 20121 is just part of it now, isn't it?
It is, yeah. Actually, Fueling Station as our intranet has been incredibly important when we're all working in this distributed way from home. So we had to make sure that all of those management systems were fully integrated into our Brandfuel processes, and that meant being fully integrated into our communication processes, and Fueling Station is the center of all of that. So people can really use that as a resource for literally everything to do with the business now, and sustainability is a massive part of it.
Okay, great. Talking about sustainability, I know that you're also looking at B Corp as well. Is that another potential aspiration for the organisation?
huge aspiration for us. We are in the process of changing the ownership structure of the business, moving towards complete employee ownership, which as an independent is massively important to me, personally important to me. I think it fits with our brand and our brand values hugely. And part of that step along the way is we really aspire to being a B Corporation. We want to be all about people and purpose.
Right. And I know that you've got into a bit of a groove with your ISO standards because we're actually implementing ISO 27001 with you as well. And I think that there's other standards on the agenda.
Yes, and again, it's super important because we know that this will help us to maintain relationships with existing clients and to build relationships with new clients. So the 27001 is in progress now and going really well. And straight after that, we're going to do the health and safety ISO 45001. And there is a purpose and reason for doing that. And I think it will open up new sectors and new opportunities for us commercially, as well as add really important systems and processes into our health and safety management. And let's face it, that has been front and centre and will be even more so for Event Forwards.
I look forward to hearing more about those then in due course.
Yeah.
But I'd just love to thank you very much for sharing your journey and inspirational stories as well on how you've innovated and diversified within the events industry over the last 18 months or so. And just finally, before you go, David, do you have a favourite book that you'd like to recommend?
I do. I have two, actually.
Go on then, I'll let you have two.
One is, it's a book I've gifted to people many, many times. It's called Born to Run.
Born to Run.
Born to Run is by Christopher McDougall. And it's an amazing book because it operates on three levels. It tells an incredible story about the Tarahumara Mexican runners of the Copper Canyons. It tells a personal journey about this guy called the Caballo Blanco. And it also gives an amazing history of ultra running and all the amazing ultra races. It's a fantastic book. Can't put it down. If you're into running, it's brilliant. And even if you're not, it's a great book. And the other one is Dough by Richard Bertone. I got into baking years ago, and at the very beginning of lockdown, I decided one of the things as a CEO I could do is set up a Friday bake-off session for my team.
Oh, great. I love the sound of that.
So at the time, they couldn't get any flour or yeast, and I managed to get a wholesaler to deliver me 16 kilo bags of flour and yeast. So I posted it to the team so that we could bake every week together. And it grew really quickly to freelancers joined. I have lots of clients who joined and still join.
It's still going strong then.
We've done 47 weeks of baking, and I have to keep one step ahead, learning a new bake each week.
That's a challenge.
Yeah, it really is. It really is.
I can see why the running book goes with it, because you need to do all that running to keep up with all the baking and all the cakes and bread and goodness knows what.
But it's funny because it's a lovely way for families to keep in touch. So there are truly chilling moments on these Zoom calls when I work with a lovely freelancer in the Netherlands called Lynette, and she got her dad to join, she hasn't seen for ages because he's in Weymouth. I've got a lovely ex-colleague called Steve and Jen who both worked at the company. They brought their 3-day-old baby on for a baking session, and Steve's mum, Leslie, bakes, and they have chats to each other because they can't see each other. I've got a friend of a friend called Julie in New York who bakes. We've got another Google colleague who's just joined, who's in Carolina, and we've got people in Portugal, in South Africa, Joburg, Cape Town, Italy, Germany, the Netherlands, all who join at 1 o'clock on a Friday afternoon. I've now got it to 40 minutes over lunchtime, a quick couple of minutes in the afternoon, and then we bake after work in the evening and have a drink together.
Oh, wow. So it's a true global Branfield bake-off.
Yeah, it's called Dough Balls, DB.
Dough balls.
And there's prizes too. So I always have a baker of the week who gets a Dough Balls apron. It's actually a dough baller.
sound just brilliant. Yeah, but it's such a great way to still have fun and stay connected, isn't it? You know, even despite what we're going through, as we still go through the pandemic, it just adds that bit of light touch and and sense of community as well.
Yeah, completely. I mean, it has been. I've had some amazing letters and emails from people who've literally said it's been their anchor. You know, in the darker times of last year, when freelancers who have had literally nothing to do, it's been a little beacon of light at the end of every week for them.
Yes, yeah. So just finally, before we say goodbye, have you got a quote that you'd like to leave our listeners with, David?
I have actually, and regularly used to put it on as my email sign off. And it's a quote from Mario Andretti, the racing driver. And it's simply this: if everything feels like it's under control, you're simply not going fast enough.
Right, well, on that note, I'd just like to say a huge thank you to you, David, for sparing your time today and sharing your sustainability journey, which I know is definitely an inspiration to many organisations at this current time. So thank you once again, David.
Mel, it's been a pleasure. I've really enjoyed this morning. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Great, thank you. Well, thanks to our listeners for joining us today on the ISO show. If you've enjoyed listening to the podcast today, please do leave a review and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes of the ISO show. And that's all for now, so I look forward to catching up with you on the next ISO show.
Looking to use ISO standards to drive better business practice? Contact us at blackmoresuk.com to access further information and book your free 15-minute call.